Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. Today we'll be going over the biggest changes coming next patch, and on top of that I'll also quickly touch on some changes coming over to TFT. So as usual, if you guys end up enjoying the video, then don't forget to hit that like button, but let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. So starting things off, of course, is going to be the biggest change coming this patch, being the Pantheon Rework. So in case you're unaware, I'll go very quickly over this new Pantheon Rework, and I'll also go over some already balanced changes happening on the PvE server for him. So Pantheon's passive now is similar to his old passive in the sense of you essentially stack it up, but at max stacks it'll empower one of your basic abilities, being your Q, W, E, which we'll go over in just a bit. His new Q ability is essentially his old Q, but now it has two options, one of which where you can skill shot throw it at something. The other option is you can tap it to just kind of stab stuff in front of you. Think of Pike Q, it's very similar in that sense. The difference, however, is the fact that if you use the tap version of the Q, where you just strike right in front of you, you actually get refunded a % of Comet Spear's cooldown. But if you were to throw the spear instead, it actually does bonus damage if they are below 25% HP. On top of this, if you use the empowered Q, of course, combined with his passive, then the Q will do additional bonus damage, and on top of that will also slow the target. So this one is exceptionally strong to empower whenever you're going for the kills or just going for very strong harass. Moving on to Pantheon's W, it is also very similar to his old W, where you just click on a target and you stun them, but instead now you also have an extra effect with the empowered version. Because if you empower his W, he'll also have his next basic attack do an extra of 135% physical damage. So his W empowered is actually very strong when it comes to doing damage later on in the game, since it is a % scaling. On top of this, it also makes it a fantastic 1-point wonder, unless you're going AP Pantheon or something, because it also has a flat 135% on the bonus damage. So even by like level 14 or 13, it's still level 1, but you're still doing a bunch of damage. Moving along, you have his E ability, which in my opinion is the most overpowered ability in his kit, and the reason for that is quite simple. It is essentially Braum's shield and Yasuo's wind wall combined into one. Upon activating the basic version of this ability, you essentially put out a shield in front of you. It blocks literally everything in front of you, including, from what I'm aware, true damage as well, like for instance Ignite, tower shots as well, and of course every single champion ability and attack. And you also kind of thrust your spear several times in front of you to do damage as well. On top of this, you can also move. Now, if you were to empower this ability, the duration is increased by a full second, which also, don't forget, means that you'll be having that much more time to block abilities and damage in general, and you'll also do bonus damage. But on top of everything else, as if that wasn't already enough, the final attack that he does at the very end of his E's duration, he also slams in front of him, dealing even further bonus damage. So all in all, his E ability is by far the best ability in his kit. And last but definitely not least, we have his ultimate Grand Starfall, which also very similar to his old ultimate, except now it covers a much larger distance, since it essentially has a very big sort of a line of damage that it now does. It is much easier to land, and overall it looks much cooler. And the best part of his ultimate is that it instantly refreshes the cooldown, or I guess the effects of your passive, so the second you land, you instantly have an empowered ability ready to go, whether it's Q, W, or E, depending on what you choose. Now, for those people wondering, AP Pantheon, or at least maybe Hybrid Pantheon, is still definitely a thing, because his ultimate and his W both still have AP ratios, his W having a 1-to-1 AP ratio, or in other words 100%, and his ultimate having a 50% AP ratio. All in all, the new Pantheon is absolutely amazing. He is incredibly fun to play, feels much more versatile as well, so you have more options. He feels like he scales a little bit better into the late game as well, and all in all, just truly feels like an epic champion. Now, it appears Riot is already testing some changes coming over to Pantheon on the PvE server. Now, there isn't a lot of changes from the base kind of stats that he came out with initially, but the change that they currently have for Pantheon is the AP ratio on his ultimate is now scaling off of 100% rather than 50%. So that makes AP Pantheon look quite tempting, or even at least maybe some kind of form of hybrid Pantheon with the Gunblade, right? That could be pretty damn cool. Moving along, we have somewhat of like a mini rework-ish thing coming over to Aurelion Sol, because this champion is just way too niche and pretty much nobody plays him unless you're a one-trick. So the changes to this champion are as follows. Let's start off with his passive first, Center of the Universe. The damage has been changed from starting at 20 going up to 130 based on level, to now starting only at 16 but only going up to 120. The AP ratio has also been changed to now being a flat 25% rather than being starting at 18% and going up to 35% based on level. So a little bit stronger with the ratios early, but a little bit weaker later, which overall I think is a nerf. Next up, moving on to his Q ability Star Surge, you can see here the cooldown has been changed, so the second you get it at rank 2 and above, it'll actually be a lower cooldown. The movement speed on this ability has also been changed to 20% rather than 10%, so it just moves a lot faster. And to make things a little bit more fluid, if Aurelion Sol is faster than his Q, the missile will speed up to keep up, which means that you can make it so much better for Aurelion Sol to get those long-range global Qs as well. Moving on to his W, and this is where the majority of the changes actually came into effect, it has a new effect that states the following. Aurelion Sol can now use his W to expand his stars, gaining increased damage and rotating at a high but decaying speed. Upon reactivating, or after 3 seconds, the stars will automatically retract, granting 40% movement speed, decaying over 1.5 seconds. So if I'm not mistaken, it seems like Aurelion Sol can not just activate his W and have those stars flying around him in that outer circle for essentially as long as he can maintain it based on mana. Right now it's only up to 3 seconds. But on the bright side, by the time you get it to rank 5, the cooldown on this ability is only 2 seconds, so you can kind of reactivate it fairly quickly. But I think the interesting part here is the fact that since you now get that extra movement speed the second the W is finished, right, being 40%, which is a decent amount, and the new effects of his Q where it'll speed up to Aurelion Sol's movement speed, you can get some pretty interesting things happening with that kind of synergy. And in case you were wondering, the mana cost has been changed from costing him mana per second, so by rank 5 for instance it would be 70 mana per second, to now by rank 5 being 110 mana, but just a flat 110 mana. It doesn't cost anything per second, which overall is a lot better. But it doesn't end there just yet, because apparently his E ability's passive movement speed has been removed. I guess that's just to not overload the extra movement speed he's now getting from his W, but having said that, the range on his E ability has actually been increased, especially at the earlier ranks. So it's a massive increase, which is fantastic because you keep his E ability at rank 1 for a very long time, so this will help you roam better, this will help you even get to lane back from base and everything like that, so it's actually a fantastic change. The cooldown has also been changed to now being higher at the earlier ranks, and the speed has also been increased across the board. So all in all, it seems like Aurelion Sol is going to be functioning much better with movement speed in general, again with his E ability of course now giving him much more movement speed as well whenever he uses it, his Q ability with his W now combined together with the 40% increased movement speed, etc, right, all seems really good. But having said that, it also feels like Aurelion Sol needs to pick and choose his fights a little bit more carefully, especially in the earlier parts of the game, since he can't just activate the W and have the stars consistently flying around him in that bigger circle for as long as he wants, because now it'll automatically retract after 3 seconds. But it does seem like if you use these new windows of opportunity better, I think Aurelion Sol will be much more effective. Moving along, we also have some big changes coming over to Kale, which is essentially a mini rework as well, which I did make a full gameplay about. If you haven't checked it out, highly recommend you do so. The TLDR to the Kale changes are as follows. They essentially want to make her weaker late game, but stronger earlier game. And here's the way they do that. Her armor has been increased and her attack speed has also just been simply increased per level. In her base form, she now has a 10% increased movement speed in all directions rather than 15% only towards champions. She can now stack for towers, and now she gets her ranged form at level 6, which is going to be fantastic for her rather than level 7, which is when I played it personally, so that's even better now for Kale. Now having said that, her overall attack range has been lowered by 25, so even though she gets it much sooner, it's not as long range as before, but that's completely worth it. But her attack speed per stack has been lowered by 4% per stack, right? So that's obviously not a good thing, but at least her base attack speed itself has been increased to kind of try and slightly make up for that. And her final form, which is now granted at level 16, when I played it on PvE was actually level 15, no longer gives her true damage, but she now gets plus 50 range going back to 575 this time, which is actually a bit bigger than what it was before, which is crazy. So she obviously won't be as strong late game because the true damage is gone, but having said that, she'll actually be able to contribute to early fights and early skirmishes and stuff like that much more effectively since she's now an actual champion at level 6 rather than waiting all the way till level 11. Moving along, we also have some changes coming over to her Q ability where it now refunds 50% mana cost if it hits a champion. The cast delay has been lowered, the missile speed has been lowered, the range has been lowered as well, the shred has been lowered, the shred duration however has been slightly increased, which I think is overall worth it. But it seems like they have removed the extra damage that her Q offered her based on scaling, but that also could just be something that they're testing out at the very moment. Nothing is final. Next up, we also have her E ability where you can see here the execute damage has actually been changed, so now that it just overall scales better off of AP, but the percent itself, the base percent of the ability, has been lowered. But the passive effect of her E ability has also been increased in the ratios, for the AP being increased by 10% and the AD ratio also being increased by 20%. And last but not least, we have her ultimate, where the cooldown has been lowered, the mana cost has been lowered, the AoE radius has been increased by 25, but that's actually pretty good, and the AP ratio has also been increased by 10%, so her ultimate is just better in every way possible. But that essentially is the mini Kayle rework, again trying to make her an actual champion a lot earlier in the game to contribute to her team's fights and skirmishes, but having less carry potential very late into the game as well. And Riot has also announced a bunch of buffs and nerfs that are going to be incoming for the patch as it finally releases to the live servers, though the numbers themselves for the buffs and nerfs aren't on the PvE server just yet. Those champions include, for the buffs, Dr. Mundo, Scion, Fiora, Shen, Jax, Nocturne, Syndra, LeBlanc, Kassadin, Echo, Lux Support, and Ziggs. And for the nerfs, we have Corki, Azir, which is surprising, Yuumi, Sejuani, Ezreal, Sivir, Tahm Kench, Riven, and apparently Jungle Sylas. So hopefully in a few days, or maybe even more than that, we'll actually be able to finally get the actual nerf numbers and buff numbers for these champions. But at the moment, that's all we have. Regardless, we also have some sexy new skins coming out called Dragon Oracle Udyr, which I think actually looks surprisingly amazing. And we of course have a new Hextech skin being Hextech Rammus. Also, very quickly for TFT players, there is going to be a new Origin coming out and 4 new champions, being Camille, Jace, Jinx, and Vi, and they're going to be part of the Hextech Origin. Now, if you're wondering what does Hextech even do, well, the Hextech units temporarily disable enemy items, which is pretty cool. Camille is going to be a tier 1 cost Blade Master, Jace is going to be a tier 2 cost Shapeshifter, Vi is going to be a tier 3 cost Brawler, and Jinx is going to be a tier 4 cost Gunslinger. So let me know what you think about that down below as well. And the final thing, of course, is going to be some minor nerfs and buffs coming over to TFT, where minor buffs, they have Elise, Twisted Fate, Veigar, and Runaan's Hurricane, and for minor nerfs, they have changes coming over to Pyke, Rengar, Karthus, and Static Shiv. But that right there, guys, is going to be about it for this video. There you have it, a bunch of changes coming over to the PvE server already for next patch, whether it's TFT, whether it's Summoner's Rifts, a bunch of reworks, and all that goodness. So let me know what you think about it down below, boys and girls. If you're excited or if you enjoyed the video for whatever reason, then don't forget to hit that like button. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.